Hello and welcome to Israel Update. I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv, and with me, you might have guessed, the man himself, Mike Doran, at the offices of the Hudson Institute. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, Gadi. Hello. How are you doing?
I'm okay. You have closed blinds because a storm has engulfed Washington, or just rain. What is it?
It's just gloomy, and if I
Uh-huh.
have the blinds open, then you get me reflected in the window.
In the back.
My back reflected in the window.
We're
Yeah.
watching your back, Mike. We are
Yeah,
glad
you
to
would
tell
be.
we are glad to tell you that we are almost, Mike, at 10,000 followers. Really this close. Next time
Oh,
we speak to you, we would probably have passed that threshold. And it's only been what we started, I think, October 14 or around that time, mid-October. So a month and a half. So we want to thank you for appreciating our show. We appreciate
we should give those 10,000 something special, don't you?
it.
They deserve some kind of gift.
I forgot my wallet. What do you want to give them?
Well, we can't give them money through this medium. I don't have any money to give any. I can only give advice.
Oh,
I'll give them special advice.
I don't speak Yiddish, but you know the Yiddish Eitzesgeber,
No,
a hero of advice. It's a mocking
it's an
Yiddish.
ironic term.
Yeah, it's a
So, yeah,
mocking Yiddish term from those who sit on the sidelines and have advice for everybody, and they have tough advice. So, what's your advice, Mike?
my advice to them is to be lucky. I think I'm 61 years old, and I've seen a lot, and I determined that the best thing to do is first of all, you should choose your parents well, and secondly, you should be lucky.
Don't
Or
give
you should be
don't give that. I'm talking to our viewers, Mike. Don't give that advice for free to people who are not our followers. So
no,
this is
not
for followers
but
only.
I'll take it even a step further.
Premium advice.
I'll take it a step further. They should be serendipitous.
Oh,
Do you know what the definition of serendipity is?
I did. It's something that it's a lucky coincidence. Something.
A serendipity is searching for a needle in a haystack and finding the farmer's daughter.
And how do you translate the biblical חיפש את האתונות ומצא את המלוכה?
I've never heard it. I don't know. I didn't understand it.
חיפש
את האתונות. מה זה
האתונות? I think it's female donkeys. King David went to search for donkeys and he found.
Oh, there you have it.
Monarchy.
There you have it. So I was basically quoting the Bible without realizing it.
Exactly. And you're Catholic, so it's, as far as I know, the same Bible. So, Mike, what do we have on today? We'll give you a military update. That is, you will give a military update. We will concentrate on the question we started to debate in the last episode, but has become a hotter topic. Is the U.S. aiming to shut down the war? And the aftermath of Blinken's visit has maybe turned a corner for this war. And then we will discuss briefly the question: internal politics in Israel. Is the coalition fraying? There are signs that the coalition is not speaking in one voice. And that would be all that we'll be able to do this time around. So over to you, Mike, for the headlights.
Okay, so since we last saw you, dear 10,000 followers, what's happened? The war resumed on Friday morning, Israel time. The deal to extend Israelis thought they had a deal with Hamas to extend the pause for hostage exchange, but Hamas decided to break the deal. The IDF is fighting in both the north and the south now. Hamas says that at least 200 Palestinians have been killed in the last 2 days. There's no way to confirm this number, and it doesn't come from any other source. The IDF has had 2 fatalities in the last 2 days, and since the start of the war, the IDF has reported 398 soldiers killed. Also, yesterday, That is, on Saturday, the IDF announced that it killed the commander of the battalion that carried out the attack on Nahal Oz on October 7. That was a big, tactical win for the Israelis. But the big news, really, and we're going to talk about this in detail in a minute, is that Secretary of State Blinken went to Israel and made some very pointed public remarks about the Israelis needing to fight the war differently than they have been fighting it. And so there's a lot of discussion in the Israeli press. I would say the Israeli press is dominated by discussion of one way or another what this means. Prime Minister Netanyahu last night said that he would do everything to realize the holy task of returning the hostages. And he also said that there is no way to win except by continuing the ground maneuver. We will see if, in fact, we will discuss in just a minute if the Americans are going to give the Israelis enough time to do that. Back to you, Gadi.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly back to me since you are the military expert in this show. So why don't we start with looking at what is going on in the ground incursion?
Just for the record, I feel nervous when you call me a military expert, because I'm not really one. I just know a lot of military experts. But give me, let's have a map. Can you put up the map?
Sure. Here it is.
So the blue areas show you where the Israelis are deeply ensconced, I guess you might say, on the ground. And you can see in the north, there are the two areas where they have issued evacuation warnings, and they're fighting there now, bombing heavily. These are the areas circled in red. And at the same time, we go down to the south. They're moving in now into Khan Yunis, or around Khan Yunis. And you see the areas where they've given evacuation warnings in the south. But they have, we also just this morning, sort of between those and a little bit north, between those two areas that are circled in red, an Israeli tank was spotted. So they appear to be moving in. Whether that is just a raid, a reconnaissance raid, or whether they are really moving in is not clear. But I suspect that after, I don't have any information, I suspect that after the pressure from the Americans, the Israelis are going to have to do the work in the north and the south simultaneously. One last point, Gadi, if you go all the way down to the south to the Rafah crossing, all the way down there, in order to win, and when I say win, that's to achieve the objectives that the Israelis have publicly defined. They have to take Khan Yunis. They have to capture Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, who's in a bunker somewhere under Khan Yunis. They have to return all of the hostages, and they are also going to have to take the Rafah crossing. That is the most important economic artery of Gaza. And as long as Hamas retains effective control of it, it means that Hamas will have a stranglehold on the economy. These are going to be very difficult objectives to obtain if the Americans are putting as much pressure as their rhetoric suggests.
There have been reports of about, this is from Telegram, about 500 piers. Is that the right word? That's the vertical passageway to the tunnels.
Yeah, piers? I think we say, what do we say? Shaft, just a shaft.
So out of 800 known shafts, 500 have been blown up by Israel. There are various tactics that are used against the tunnels. We've seen, I think we've mentioned here, the foam bombs.
Yes.
The material that's used, I think it was invented for isolation, for heat isolation, is you put it in walls and the foam creates.
Oh, really?
The foam takes up all the given space like gas and isolates thing. I'm guessing it shuts all the airways, and there are rumored other ways of dealing with a tunnel which are not cleared by the military censorship.
I asked an Israeli military official what are the ways to take care of the tunnels? And he said there are three. There's the foam. He didn't call it foam, but that's what he was talking about. There's just dropping a bomb down the shaft, blowing it up. And then there is a third way that he did not want to talk about. He said,
we can't talk about that one. I was going to stop you.
No, I don't know. He told me. He said there's a third one I can't talk about. I don't. Now I know that you know.
Journalists know in Israel, but it's not been cleared yet with the military censorship. It's another technology that the army is now using for that. Is that all we have to say on the military update, or do you want to say something about the intensive bombing? Do we know how intensive it is relative to what Israel did in the north in the beginning of the
very hard to tell, but you know, it's purely from the anecdotal accounts on Telegram and so on. It seems like Han Yunis had an extremely difficult 2 days, the last 2 days. And there are suggestions from Israeli journalists that talking to the IDF that Hamas suffered a lot in these bombings, but you never know. You never know. The IDF has never bombed Gaza and said anything other than that it was very, very painful for Hamas. But Hamas still managed to send off rockets against, as you know, yesterday against Tel Aviv, and the Iron Dome was activated a few times. So it's quite amazing that we're over 50 days into this thing and they still have the ability to launch rockets. Interestingly, it's probably worth noting why the hostage deal fell apart. Sinwar, the idea, the agreement that the Israelis felt they had arrived at with Hamas was that all the women and children would be released. And then Sinwar changed it and said he wanted elderly people, elderly men, to be released. And what that would do, it would change the equation, because the elderly on the Israeli side are actually just elderly people who are retirees sitting in the kibbutzim in the south. The elderly in the hands of the Israelis are very senior Hamas officials, terrorists who have been put away for a very long time. So the assumption is that Sinwar was being under pressure from the sort of lobby of the detainees, those who are detained by Israel, to get some of them out. Who knows? Hard to say, but that seems to have been the dynamic. Who knows what was going on the Hamas side, but that was the dynamic between the two.
It's worth noting that Sinwar himself was once the head of the detainees in Israel. He was treated in Israel for a tumor in his head and was cured by Israeli doctors who made a serious mistake, apparently. And this morning on my radio show, I talked to someone who was in charge of Sinwar's interrogation and his impressions of the man. And we are talking about a fanatically cruel and sadistically inclined, very tough head of the prisoners when he was in Israeli jail. He himself executed, said my interviewee, is that a word? He himself executed 3 prisoners by slitting their throats with a razor in his own hands. Now, since he's in Israel's hands, and he was doing 6 consecutive life sentences or something like that, he has no problem admitting that he killed anyone, because his only hope of being released is, of course, a hostage deal, which Israel regrettably freed him in. And
there's a great interview with him in Hebrew. Have you seen that, by an Israeli journalist? I can't remember his name. Back in like 2005 or 6, his Hebrew is excellent, Sinwar, because he studied it while he was in Israeli prison, and he comes across. He doesn't come across as comes across as a very reasonable. I mean, he's at that moment was trying to carry out trying to charm the Israelis, and he came across as rather nice and charming. He doesn't. You don't get the feeling when you're watching him interact with the journalist that you are talking to one of the coldest people. He can be. He's like any politician. He can be many things to many people.
Yeah, and I'll add just one bit of detail is that a lot of his conversations with his colleagues in Hamas were recorded, and apparently it turns out that the conversations are heavily laden in religious terminology and verses from the Quran. They keep in all his conversation. He's very religious. He keeps quoting these things in conversations with his lieutenants. Apparently, he doesn't share Barack Obama's idea that Islam is a religion of peace. So we now turn to the United States. Why don't we start by seeing Blinken's message to the press?
The way Israel defends itself matters. It's imperative that Israel act in accordance with international humanitarian law and the laws of war, even when confronting a terrorist group that respects neither. In my meetings today with the Prime Minister and senior Israeli officials, I made clear that before Israel resumes major military operations, it must put in place humanitarian civilian protection plans that minimize further casualties of innocent Palestinians. That means taking more effective steps to protect the lives of civilians, including by clearly and precisely designating areas and places in southern and central Gaza where they can be safe and out of the line of fire. It means avoiding further significant displacement of civilians inside of Gaza. It means avoiding damage to life-critical infrastructure, like hospitals, like power stations, like water facilities. And it means giving civilians who've been displaced to southern Gaza the choice to return to the north as soon as conditions permit. There must be no enduring internal displacement. All of this can be done in a manner that still enables Israel to achieve its objectives. Of course, we know that every one of these elements is made more complicated by the fact that Hamas intentionally embeds itself with civilians, within and below hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, refugee camps. But Israel has one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world. It is capable of neutralizing the threat posed by Hamas while minimizing harm to innocent men, women, and children. And it has an obligation to do so.
Well, there you have the restrictions that the Americans are putting on the Israelis, at least in public. That you can't. Yes, Hamas is hiding behind schools. Yes, it's hiding behind hospitals. Yes, it's hiding behind civilians. But you, Israel, cannot attack schools, hospitals, or civilians. So, how are the Israelis to do this? The Americans are saying in their conversations with the Israelis, well, you should do it like we did when we fought ISIS. But we, of course, the United States, of course, leveled Mosul and leveled Raqqa when it fought ISIS. So we have some memory of a kinder, gentler urban offensive by America than was actually ever carried out. So that's kind of well, I was going to say it's kind of amusing, but it would be amusing if it weren't so serious. The question is how this is clearly designed. This position that Blinken is taking, that the administration is taking, it's clearly designed to appease the progressive left. It's clearly designed to appease the Arab allies who are getting nervous at the length of this war and the amount of civilian casualties and so on. But how much emphasis, how much pressure are they going to put on the Israelis if the Israelis don't live up to these what are really impossible standards? If you can't move the population of Gaza, and you have to fight around civilians, and you have to kill terrorists who are hiding behind civilians, these are impossible dictates.
And also he said to the cabinet that the time is running out, and that
yes,
and you quoted, I think, Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, who said Israel is united behind the effort to eliminate Hamas, even if it takes months. To which, according to the leak, Blinken replied, "You don't have months, you have weeks." So not only are we constrained by impossible restrictions, which I've seen you mock, Mike, on your Twitter feed, and calling them and advising Israel to use its magic wand. Not only are we restricted, we also have a limited time frame, and so this seems to push Israel in a direction that is a cul-de-sac and an inability to win the war. What happened to the agreement on the war aims of destroying Hamas? And as you recall, the Biden administration said that Hamas will be replaced by the Palestinian Authority, and that will get us back on track to the two-state solution once the Palestinians are united under a single administration. So destroying Hamas seemed to be part of that plan, but now are they trying to tie Israel's hands so we don't defeat Hamas?
I really don't know. If I had to guess, the Secretary of Defense was asked about all of these restrictions, and he said, the American Secretary of Defense Austin, and he said no. The goal is to see Hamas defeated. Vice President Kamala Harris is talking publicly about the revitalization of the Palestinian Authority. You'll be excited by that, and clearly this is a real discussion that's going on. Because Prime Minister Netanyahu, let's see, I was going to read the quote in the news and then I decided against it. Do I have it here? Anyway, I have a quote from Netanyahu saying there will not, it's impossible to bring the Palestinian Authority back to Gaza.
He said more, and this has to do with our next item. So I'll just mention it and we can discuss it later. He said, "So long as I am sitting in this chair, the Palestinian Authority will not get into Gaza," hinting to the other coalition partners about all the rumors and conspiracies swirling around the demand from the left that he would resign. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So the I tend to think that at this stage, that if the Israelis are involved in fighting in Khan Yunis, for example, and it's 3 weeks from now, I can't see the Americans shutting it down. Maybe they will, but they have ways of beginning to squeeze the Israelis. You know, they can withhold. They can stop giving Israel cover in the UN. They can start withholding resupply of the of weapons, which doesn't seem to have happened until now. But I noticed that there are more and more leaks about how much the United States has supplied Israel with, which I wonder where that's coming from and why is that not, is the information coming out about how much the United States has supplied designed to start a conversation about supply? I don't know. One can get too clever in interpreting all these things. Not everything that happens is by design, but it's an open question is the point here. I'll bet that the Americans still want to see Hamas defeated, but they're getting nervous.
So we're moving to the next item, and it does tie in because there is a faction in Israel that's beginning to make noises about the war being unwinnable. And since this faction is from the left, one senses that perhaps there is an Israeli-American cooperation behind the scene. And let's lay it out and explain it. For the Israeli left, what is the greatest obstacle to the two-state solution, which many still believe in, is the right, and also, Mike, the voters. For the Israeli left, it has been amply demonstrated that the biggest problem with democracy is citizens, and that this problem can be bypassed through a did it through a bureaucracy that's very committed, that would cooperate with an American administration. So note what is happening. From the beginning of the war, the Biden administration said that the Palestinian Authority would be back in Gaza, and that would bring back the two-state solution. Now, the two-statists in Israel, and this is noticeable in the press among Israel's elites, are willing to sacrifice a great deal for achieving their aim, even without convincing the voters. So while new polls show that there is a sharp turn to the right in the Israeli electorate, the apparent reaction among Israel's elites, and I'll mention journalists in a minute, is looking for new ways to bypass this danger. Because for these people, the greatest danger to Zionism is the greater
Zionist.
Israel. No, it's the greater Israel, because what they're afraid of is that we will have at one point either to annex and give the vote to a huge Palestinian population, or else to create some permanent form of apartheid, which will enable only Jews or only Israeli Jews and Israeli Arab citizens to vote without giving citizenship to people that Israel will annex. So this is their nightmare. I used to belong to that faction, and I know it from within. And some of them are real Zionists, and they think that they have to rescue Zionism from binationalism. So it's really a question of what it is you think is the greater danger: Hamas, Iran, the radical Islamist, or the danger to
and of course, if you see the world that way, then you see you're aware that that you're a minority in your own country. You can only, the best way to counterbalance the power of the majority is by working with the Americans to constrain the options of the government.
Exactly. So now let's connect the dots, because these people have begun to say that the war is unwinnable. We have Gantz and Eisenkot, who have joined this coalition but belong to the left and are Gantz
and who are card-carrying members of the security establishment. Both of them were the chiefs of staff.
And how should I put it? And true believers of the Democratic administration. And so people like Gantz, suspected by some to be a mere stooge of the American left, may be maneuvering into a situation where Israel will not win the war. Now, I'm saying this carefully. They don't want Israel's destruction, but when Nahum Barnea, a leading pundit in Yediot Achronot, and I think on the same page, Ben-Dror Yemini, another prominent journalist belonging to the faction I just described, are starting to say that the war is unwinnable, one begins to suspect that they think that they can leverage this war.
You smell a possible campaign, is what you're saying.
Oh, that's a very mild way of putting it. Yes, I do. And you know, these people affiliated with the security establishment and with the think tanks that get money from the Democratic establishment in the Democratic Party's establishment in America, and all these people, the generals who've been trained in American universities and then get consulting jobs in American think tanks and other places, they are busy with post-war plans now. And
can I give you a, I don't know how much I want to feed your theory, but I'll give you, let me read something to you here. This is from also Yediot Achronot today, and it's Giora Island. He's a retired general, respected guy, and he says that why is the American pressure being put on Israel? And he said, ostensibly, the American position represents different interests than ours. Firstly, because both U.S. friends in the Middle East and the progressives in America are angry over what appears to be American approval for Israel to kill Palestinian civilians. There's probably some truth to this assertion, he says, but there are also other reasons. The first is, as said, an American lack of understanding of the reality in Gaza, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The second is the anger at Israel over what the hilltop youth are doing to the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. So American anger over the settlers in the West Bank. And the third reason, and Gadi, this is the grist for your mill, the third reason is the prime minister's inexplicable refusal to present any sort of plan for the day after. After all, the day after is another unhatched egg in any case. So what is the problem for him to say the following sentence? Israel will be pleased to cooperate with any moderate element, including Palestinians, in creating a safe reality for Israel. The fourth reason, concealed from everyone, but also the most significant. So now we're coming to the most significant of all. Why are the Americans putting pressure on Israel? Because of the deep loathing that the U.S. president has for Prime Minister Netanyahu. Yes, as the Godfather said, it's all personal. Actually, the Godfather didn't say that. He said it's just business, right? But anyway, as of October 7, another component was added to this loathing: contempt. It is very hard to manage a deep national crisis when the degree of esteem and trust of the U.S. toward the Israeli leadership is what it is. So the bottom line, Israel cannot achieve its war aims because Netanyahu has made himself so unattractive to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, at least as far as it goes with Biden, I don't think there's any serious personal animosity between these two men. But I also don't think that Biden is running the show. So Giora Island, we just had a discussion of this. Does he believe this? Does he believe this? I don't know what to call this demagoguery. But what I can tell you is that they are all amateur Kissingers. They all think that if Israel doesn't win too much, then there will be a chance to create some balance at the end and then to go for the two-state solution. Now, I see your half smile saying this verges in a conspiracy theory.
I can't follow you as far as you've gone. You've gone too far.
So you're entitled to your opinion, Mike, but I know these people. I know them very well, and you don't know what conspiracy theories are going on now in Israel, because some in Israel are and this leads me to the dumbest take on the news this week. Because in some circles in Israel, the people are talking not about a mechdal, not about a what did you call it?
A screw up.
Not a screw up. Yeah.
Well, it's and there's no translation. I'd say an act of negligence that has a very disastrous impact.
Some people are actually talking about betrayal and a conspiracy, and someone said that on Channel 14, and Channel 14 got so scared that they kicked her out and said she can't be interviewed again.
No, you had to explain to me what conspiracy did she?
The conspiracy was that there must have been, that this was an inside job gone wrong.
What is this? October 7th?
October 7th, that someone conspired with the Hamas to let them achieve a minor terror attack in order to help them topple Netanyahu. This is the conspiracy theory, and it just went horribly wrong. No one assumed that it would go this far. So Smadar Shmueli, who once worked with Ehud Barak, and this makes everything, because a lot of theories are swirling around Ehud Barak and his complicated schemes. She said this on Channel 14, and the reaction was so. You can find this on Twitter. I can send you.
By the way, I was starting to make a list, and then I stopped of different theories I heard, because people don't believe, Israelis and non-Israelis don't believe that Israel could have been caught so blindly, and so now you have all these stories about the Israeli intelligence knew that this attack was coming and didn't take it seriously. So that suggests that they didn't do it because there was some larger plan. I don't believe it for a second, any of it, of course, but these have been out there for a long time. So from the beginning.
So to get back to my earlier point, the idea that these people are thinking of some indecisive end to this war as leverage to bring back the two-state solution with American assistance is not in my opinion, is not a far-fetched theory at all. I'm sure it's their preferred solution. I'll just say to end this segment that this is preposterous because the Israeli public has moved so far away from the two-state solution. It was not there before the election. No party could get elected on a platform of a two-state solution. But now, after the October 7 attacks, people are looking at the tiny Gaza Strip and thinking, if you have a huge Hamas-controlled territory in the heart of Israel, in Judea and Samaria, overlooking Tel Aviv, who would live in Tel Aviv if it's 10 minutes away from a terror base that could launch a far bigger, far worse attack on Israel using the army that the Palestinian Authority has? And we have screened in this show some evidence of how they are training 30,000 soldiers to military action disguised as police. So conspiracy theories lead us to the dumbest take on the news this week. So I'll put it up, although it's in Hebrew, and I'll translate. Mike, you laugh before everyone else because I'm sure that you would understand what this is about. So this is Michael Hauser Tov. He's a journalist, and he writes this. Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked by Haaretz, of course, by Haaretz, who else, about a poll saying about a third of the Israeli public believes that someone in the military establishments were either took part or knew in advance of the Hamas attack. And then says Michael Hauser Tov, the prime minister refused to deny the conspiracy. The prime minister refused to deny the conspiracy. And then he quotes the prime minister saying, "En shum, there is no conspiracy. There never was a conspiracy. There can't be a conspiracy. There are questions that need answered. But what happened, how it happened, will be discussed at the end of the war." And he comes from Galet Tzahal. By the way, his father...
He refused to... What would the denial of the conspiracy be other than there is no conspiracy? That's beautiful.
His father is Tzvi Hauser, who used
I know the Tzvi Hauser.
Tzvi Hauser used to be the secretary of the cabinet under Netanyahu, and they had a very, very serious fallout, and he became one of the Never Bibi crowd. These people you sometimes suspect are willing to burn the country down if it can be assured that Bibi will be stuck in this fire.
I know Tzvi Hauser personally. Is extremely intelligent, but you're right. The desire, the belief that Netanyahu is the greatest disaster that the country has ever befallen the country. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that he would probably agree with that. I mean, the whole goal of his politics is he's quite open about it. I mean, it's not he's not hiding it in any way. But what was the falling out between?
Not clear. There was a famous clip here where Netanyahu berated him in front of the cameras when he was a junior. I mean, he was a secretary of the cabinet, but junior compared to Netanyahu. And some say that this is the origin of the grudge. His son walks in his footsteps. His son came from the leftist army radio in Israel, Galei Tzahal, and he keeps attacking Netanyahu, this time in this ridiculous, idiotic way.
That was funny.
But he knew it would fly because people hate his crowd. His crowd, you get points for slandering Netanyahu, no matter what you say. But the funny thing is, he is still a registered member of Likud. He's a journalist. He attacks Netanyahu all the time, and he retained his membership in the party. I tried to get his reaction to a question about that, but he refused to answer. So this is all from us today, unless, Mike, you have some concluding remarks.
I do not. I did not find a dumbest take this week. I'm sorry. That which is not to suggest that all the takes out there were really smart. I just wasn't looking in the right places. I was
Um,
not. I was not serendipitous.
So you will have to make do with Mike's smart advice from the beginning of the show without a dumb take. And this is all from us. We will be here again on Wednesday, I believe, Mike, right?
I have to talk to you about that. Maybe Thursday. No, Wednesday. It will be Wednesday. It will be
It
Wednesday.
will be Wednesday.
It will
Stay
be Wednesday.
tuned for a Wednesday episode of Israel Update. And as we say at the end of shows in Israel, keep safe.
Yes, do. Keep safe.